More than enough food is being produced to feed the world, but almost 1 billion people remain hungry or malnourished. Why? And what should be done to reduce the amount of food going to waste in rich Western nations? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Adrian Finnegan. Welcome to the programme. A time for festivities. It was Diwali, then Eid, then Thanksgiving, and soon it'll be Christmas and the New Year. And regardless of the religion or the occasion, the one common denominator in any celebration is, of course, food. And its wastage, which helps to worsen an already grim situation. In the UK, households throw away about 8.3 million tonnes of food every year. And in the US, Americans toss out 40% of all food they buy each year. This, as 925 million people in the world don't have enough to eat. 1 in 7 goes hungry, despite the fact that there is enough food to feed the entire global population of 6.7 billion people. 98% of the world's hungry live in developing nations. 65% of them live in just 7 countries: Indonesia, China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and the Democratic Republic of Congo and Ethiopia. Well, joining us now to discuss the issues surrounding food wastage and hunger are our guests. In Rome, Gregory Barrow, he's the chief spokesman of the UN's World Food Programme. In London, Jean-Michel, the executive director of Action Against Hunger in the UK. And here in Doha, Sheikh Hamad bin Ali al-Thani, Vice Chairman of the Qatar National Food Security Programme. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us. Greg Barrow, if I can start with you in Rome. It's 2010. The world has the resources and the ability to feed everyone on the planet. Why are so many still going hungry?
Well, Adrian, there are many, many reasons. It could be natural disasters, civil conflict. It could just simply be the basic fact that food is too expensive for the very poorest to afford it, to put the food on the table that they need to feed their families. If you take this year, the World Food Programme is probably going to feed somewhere between 90 and 100 million people. We'll be really focusing on the hungriest of the hungry, those who were caught up in disasters like the floods over the summer in Pakistan, the earthquake almost a year ago in Haiti, and the drought in the eastern Sahel region of West Africa. So we're getting food to those who really have no other options but to rely on international agencies like the World Food Programme. But we're also focusing on helping communities and countries that have just come out of a disaster to put them on the road to recovery, to provide them with the means to rebuild their lives, to literally stand on their own 2 feet again, and using food and food assistance. Sometimes we give cash, sometimes we give training, sometimes we use food in exchange for work on community projects. So it's a way of getting communities started again after a disaster.
And where does the issue of food wastage come into the picture?
Well, it's not really an issue that we're addressing out into the 70-odd countries where the World Food Programme is working, but I think it's an issue that we're aware of, and certainly if you look at many of the industrialised developed nations where much of the funding for the World Food Programme comes from, there is an issue here. I think we've heard many situations, you mentioned the UK and the United States, where there is a large degree of food wastage, and I think if you look at it as the expenditure of a household, certainly as an agency that depends on donations for every single cent of its income, we would certainly welcome a situation where ordinary people in developed nations look more closely at what they're spending their money on, and if they can avoid wasting food, perhaps they could think about devoting or donating some part of the money they save to helping agencies like the World Food Programme to carry out the work that we're doing around the world.
In London, Jean-Michel, among the many things that your organisation does, Action Against Hunger UK, you work particularly closely with the food industry in the UK on this issue of food wastage, don't you?
But we are working indeed with the food industry because obviously there are synergies between what they are doing and the fight that we have towards trying to end child malnutrition and child hunger. So what we are trying to, the message that we are trying to pass is to say that we are not trying to cultivate the guilty feeling, is that, as you mentioned, the festive time is coming, but it is a time of enjoyment and food is very crucial. However, I think that what we try to say is that there are intelligent ways to consume, and we think that indeed it's all about good quality food, but it's also a moment of sharing. And what we try to encourage, and we do it with the food industry, with the restaurant campaign, with the food producers, the food distributors, is to say that there should be a solidarity at that moment. And we are having some partnership with companies like Unearth and other 500 restaurants, where they had a pound, a penny on every product. I'm convinced that the future, it's a way for the engaging people towards ending hunger is food consumption and having a kind of responsible consumption. And indeed, all this waste that we can see during that period is not morally wrong, is also such a waste of resources. Imagine how much water, how much energy has been required to produce, to distribute this food at that time. So I really think that we are sending the wrong model in terms of the way that we are wasting and consuming. So I think that there are big challenges for us in our society, but there is a big will from the people, consumers and producers, to engage towards ending hunger.
Jean-Michel, forgive my ignorance, but why can't the food that's currently wasted in countries like the UK and the US be sent to places where it's needed by those who are going hungry?
I think that this is very simple response, unfortunately, and I spent years in going to Bosnia or to the tsunami, just to be very clear on that. First of all, is to say there can't be a transfer of food especially from individuals to poor people in other countries due to cost, transport cost, expiring date, the fact that maybe what we are sending is not fitting the eating habits and the willing of people. That's not what they want. So we have to respect what their dignity and respect what they wanted to. So it's by far not the most cost-effective ways to help people. The most effective will be to develop and help people to develop their own food production, as well as to have a better access to the local products and the local farmers' products. So I think that it seems obvious with the figures that we say, okay, we could transfer it to from UK to the African, but this cliche is over, and I've witnessed that in Bosnia or in the tsunami, receiving cargoes of a wide range of products, useless, which was not really, the expiry date was over, the people were not eating that, didn't like it, and it all rots. It was rotting in the containers, and it cost a fortune to bring it. So unfortunately, I think that, fortunately, I will say, NGOs and the UN, we have changed and we are going towards a road which is much about supporting local production and supporting local markets and supporting the development of the demand.
Okay, talking about local production, let's bring in Sheikh Hamad bin Ali al-Thani here in Doha. So Qatar is a rich nation. No one goes hungry here, but it is faced with a dilemma in that out of necessity, it has to import much of what it consumes. Does the nation have a program to reduce the impact that it has on the environment in terms of waste and recycling, and upon other nations who produce food that may be needed in their own home markets?
All right. For Qatar itself, recycling, this is the solution in terms of this organic material, is a very important component of our overall holistic approach of solving our problem. Like Qatar, like other countries, for the last 5 years, we have a wake-up call that there is a problem that we have to face and find an urgent solution. And Qatar is unique in terms, we have done a program that's a long-term program for 15 years, where we will be able to find an approach that maybe that we, once we have developed it and implemented, we can really help the global hunger by exporting that knowledge that we have gained. Qatar is in a unique position because Qatar is in a very green configuration. We have an opportunity to integrate multiple of different sectors in a solution where food can really be produced in areas where it's an arid country. And we hope that in 5 years, Qatar will be able to be a zero net waste in organic material.
Now that's quite exciting. I was going to ask you about the importance of food security to Qatar. It's geographically quite small. It's mostly arid. From what you're saying there, if all goes according to plan, Qatar should be self-sustaining, not just in terms of food production, but in terms of its water production as well, drinking water, irrigation water.
Right. In our program, we have identified two important sectors. One is the water, and the other one is agriculture and food. Water was actually one of the easiest problems to solve, which everybody thought was more critical. Qatar has a large amount of irradiated land mass that can be converted to solar power, and with that we can distill a lot of great amounts of water. So that was an easy part to solve. The agricultural part is more difficult because we are putting a new framework how to get the food to the citizens. And that is, and we are working on this program, and hopefully in the next year we will be starting the detailed design, and we will have a program that we will start in 2 or 3 years.
Okay, gentlemen, it's not just the people in developing nations that are suffering here with hunger and malnutrition, with high rates of unemployment. Record numbers of people in the United States, for instance, are being forced to rely on food assistance. Let's get more on that now from Al Jazeera's Tom Ackerman.
Chris Miller is on another shopping spree, and everything he picks up here is free. Hundreds of kilos of groceries that this store gives away to charity every week, items that have gotten a little too old to appeal to paying customers.
They're pretty good to us at Walmart. They take care of us as far as donations.
20% of the donations collected by the Food Bank of Delaware is what they call rescued food, like this bruised can of beans.
This can be used because of the code date that's on it, because it does have a dent, but the dent hasn't compromised it.
The trouble is, food donations of all kinds just are not keeping up with the soaring need in this state. Delaware's jobless rate, now 8.3%, has doubled in the past 5 years. Over that same period, the food bank saw an even bigger jump in demand, and it now serves more than 1 of every 4 people in the state.
The greatest growth in demand right now is with our children's programs.
Yet America is hardly a country that suffers from a shortage of food, as a visit to any garbage dump can attest. This one landfill takes in about 2,000 tons of trash every day, about half of it classified as food waste. But much of that total could more fairly be classified as wasted food. According to a recent U.S. government study, food waste per person now totals at least 1,400 calories per day. That equals more than half the average nutrition needs for adult American men. Tim Bennett has just dropped off a load of household food scraps at a plant which turns the trash into clean compost. He says some of his customers could do better in minimizing their waste.
People may buy a whole bunch of apples, and they may eat, they buy 15 apples, maybe they eat 10 of them, but by the time they get to their 5, that's no good.
Back at the food bank, the message for businesses is simple: dump less, donate more.
There's a fear, there's just a resistance. So all you need to do is call us up, and then we will go pick it up. It's relatively easy.
Tom Ackerman, Al Jazeera, Newark, Delaware.
Jean-Michel Grand in London. I mean, many people will be surprised by that, to hear that even in rich nations like the US, people are going hungry. It seems to me that we need not only to deal with the way in which the world produces food, but the way in which it is distributed and consumed. What role does education have to play in all of this?
I think you're reaching the key point is that There is, I think that there is a kind of cliche in thinking that by increasing the production we are going to sort out hunger. And I think, like we have seen here, we have heard in the US, the question is more about the inequalities with the access to food. And I think that in US as well and in many other countries is about creating jobs and having people having the capacities, the resources to buy, to have access to the market. And it's, I think that we have seen here in this report about the food reuse and to have this food bank distribution, which is fantastic. But on the long term, I'm sure that, and we can see here, it's about creating jobs and people getting the money for them to buy their own food. And it's more or less exactly the same system, is that it is about having access to the resources to produce food. So it can be land, it can be water, like we've seen in Qatar. It can be credit, and that's exactly how we can tackle on the long term, on the long run, hunger. And here it is really about educating the different actors, the different governments, the different donors about the necessity to have this two-pronged approach, providing humanitarian assistance of food and then looking at the same time at the longer term, addressing the longer term problems of hunger by supporting local farmers and local households to have the means to buy their food and to have access to food.
Greg Barrow in Rome, we've been talking about the impact that food wastage has on the issue of hunger, but it's a much bigger issue than this, isn't it? I mean, to what extent do things like agricultural subsidies, land clearance for biofuel production and water management impact upon hunger?
Well, you're absolutely right, Adrian. It's a very complex picture with lots of different factors coming into play. And I think I would tend to agree with what Jean-Michel was saying, that this is really an issue about access to food. I think we all realize that there are many situations where food is available but people are unable to buy it, or situations where farmers are toiling away in the fields but not able to lift their levels of production to meet the demand. And I think this is something that the World Food Programme is looking at, and it goes back to how one can help and how it doesn't always make sense to take wasted food and move it to a different area. And what we're looking at is a program called our Purchase for Progress program, where we're actually using our situation as a purchaser of food for hungry people in regions like sub-Saharan Africa to give that money to small farmers and help them to raise the levels of production, improve simple things like their storage facilities, the way that they put their produce in bags, and the means by which they get their produce from the fields to markets. All of this can create a more sustainable situation that benefits the whole community and at the same time lifts levels of agricultural production and the economy as a whole. So I think you've got to look at this through several lenses and try and see what is the most effective way of using the resources that you have, the resources that we have as the World Food Programme, to really improve the situation in the long term.
And Greg, a very brief answer if you can, because I want to bring back Sheikh Hamad to answer a question here. But just tell me briefly about the World Food Programme's mandate. It relies upon donor nations, doesn't it? It's not an organisation that takes money directly from the public.
No, we primarily get money from governments, and there's a long list of governments that have funded our work over many years, but we do get an increasingly significant amount of money from members of the public, from companies and from wealthy individuals and foundations. Now, our mandate is really to feed hungry people across the world wherever we can find them, and to help those that are affected by disasters, but also to help communities to recover after disasters, and as I was saying earlier, to build a more sustainable situation where communities can eventually graduate from our assistance and stand on their own.
Sheikh Hamad, we were talking earlier on about Qatar's impact upon the world food chain and what Qatar is doing to lessen that. But as one of the world's wealthy nations, what role does Qatar play? What responsibility does it have to help eradicate hunger?
That's right. Qatar, a while ago, I was trying to explain that Qatar, by doing this unique holistic approach, by trying to integrate different issues together, will have a solution that it can provide for the world as a solution. And Qatar will use that kind of solution as one of its vehicles to provide its use it as a foreign aid element to help countries build up their production, local production. Once that solution has been put together, that is something that we can then really provide those countries that are not well off in terms of their agricultural situation.
Jean-Michel, in London, weren't land and resources freed up by cutting down on food waste, by lowering demand, simply be put into producing other things for consumers? What I'm trying to say here, isn't the problem consumerism, runaway consumption, and not just the amount of waste that we produce?
I think indeed we have built a society, first of all, where we think here that food is cheap and that we can throw it away easily. And we are obsessed with the perfect food, so there's a lot of waste at the producers level side because they don't fit the criteria of the retailers. So I think that in the chain of the wastage, from the producer, the retailers to the consumers, there is a lot of efforts that can be done in terms of changing a bit the habits that we have and eating better. And I think that for the moment we are in this trend of we have cheap food here, and I think it's going to be changed because we have seen with the crisis that the prices are increasing, can increase, and they are going to increase in the future if we go towards a fairer world. And I think in terms of agriculture, so it's not about consuming less, it's to consume better,
right,
and to plan how we want to consume the quantities. And I think that that's really a message that Action Against Hunger is trying to do, to transmit here in the UK through our Fight Hunger, Eat Out campaign, is eat better, and let's try to reduce this wastage at every level and try to support the others by contributing
I'm going to interrupt you, Jean-Michel, because we're almost out of time, and I want to put one more point, an issue that you raised there to Greg Barrow in Rome. You touched upon prices, which is another problem at the heart of the issue of hunger. And Greg, something we haven't discussed yet, are conflicts, armed conflicts, violent conflicts that are linked to the issue of hunger at natural resources like food and water.
Yes, and I think you've only got to look to the nation of Sudan to see an example of the impact of conflict on the lives of literally millions of people. We're already, let us remind ourselves, still feeding around 3 million people in camps in the western Sudanese region of Darfur. We have a referendum, a very, very critical referendum vote coming up in the new year in January in southern Sudan, where there is already high levels of malnutrition, many people on the move or possibly on the brink of being displaced if there is any kind of an upsurge of instability in those areas. So conflict is a very, very serious aspect of our work, and not just because of the people it moves, it's because it simply moves the producers away from their fields. When you have situations where farmers cannot tend their fields because of conflict, where they can't go back, perhaps because anti-personnel mines have been laid, or they're at risk of danger to their own lives if they're tending their fields, then the local production of food is going to plummet.
Yes.
And that's when we have to come in and feed them.
Greg, I'm so sorry, we're out of time, gentlemen, as always. We could have talked a lot longer, but thank you very much indeed to all of you in Rome, Gregory Barrow, in London, Jean-Michel Grand, and here in Doha, Sheikh Hamad bin Ali al-Thani. And thank you too for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. As always, we welcome your comments and suggestions. Email us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Bye for now.